So Katie, I wanted to ask you, you started this group. Just give a little bit of context about church communications. What's the passion behind it? And just tell a little bit about that growth cycle of how it grew to how big it is today. Because when you reached out to us about .church, I was like, hey, you may not know this, but I've been in your Facebook group for the last 5 years. And me and my old communications director at my last church, we relied so heavily on church communications group, on what to do with our social media accounts and everything. So it was like just a great resource for so much of my ministry career. So just give a little bit of the backstory behind it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, church communication started originally as a Facebook group. I started in 2015, mostly out of I just found that there were so many ministers who were doing ministry alone. Ministry is a really lonely job. And I honestly thought I would find like 50 people who wanted to complain about making church bulletins each week. And I ended up finding 28,000. And so it's wild how it grew, and it has been engaged. It still hovers around 80% engagement. So about 22,000 people use it every single day, which is wild. Like, God's done really crazy things that I just am always stunned by. But the story of church communication actually starts in 1999. And so, yeah, when I was 9 years old, I started a Harry Potter fan group. Did you know about this, Anthony?
You did tell me a tiny bit about it.
Yeah, so I started a Harry Potter forum back in 1999 with some friends I met on the internet, friends I don't have in real life. And the forum grew. I mean, we probably had 10,000 members. We had annual Yule Balls and stuff like that. It was really fun. And what I found through the forum and online community in a really early and barbaric way of online community, right? Was that I could create meaningful relationships that mattered to me, and that people really wanted online community because it served a lot of different purposes, right? So like maybe and this is exactly what it served the purpose for me. It was, I didn't have a lot of friends reading Harry Potter in my area, but I really wanted to find more people who were talking about it. So I went online looking for those people. And through that, I was able to, and I say intentionally, accidentally, because I was a kid. Okay. It wasn't like I had some like wild strategy on how I was going to reach people for the gospel, but I intentionally, accidentally shared the gospel with thousands of people through Harry Potter forums because that's what I was known for, right? For being like the Christian who's in the Harry Potter forums, but not like in a bad way. I was the admin. So, I mean, I like to think I was the life of the party, but also like the party pooper on occasion. But that's how it is when you are in charge of an online community. And so that's really where the spark for church communications came from. And it's so funny because I got interviewed several times from Facebook about how I started about how I started church communications.
Facebook, the company, you're saying, right?
Yeah, Facebook, the company, reached out to me and asked me what I was doing. So
Wow.
that was in 2017 because we were the most engaged faith-based group on the platform at that time.
That's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, which is wild. And so, and our group is faith-based, but it's not theological. I think that's important to say. This group is really about marketing and communication strategy for churches. We try not to argue about theological differences. Maybe that's why it's thrived. But so, yeah, Facebook has called us, reached out to us. And what I found that was interesting when I was having one of these conversations with them was they said that lots of online community managers have similar stories that are thriving now of running forums
Hmm.
10 or 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And so it's kind of interesting because a lot of those same applications apply, but really just being a good online community manager is just the basic rules of kindergarten, right? Like just be a nice person, get back to people, care about them as if they're a human, have a relationship with them, and then the growth will follow from there.
Man, that's so cool. And that's such an encouraging story. Like I said, people have been doing this for decades, and you're like an actual living example of someone who's been doing this for decades. So,
It's a really
so
odd thing that happened to me.
for sure. So being in the group, I see lots of people post who say, I'm struggling to get my pastor to get behind social media, or I'm struggling to get my church to care about this at all, or this is something that's been relegated to the role of the intern.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of debate on that. So from your perspective, why do you think there's been so much hesitancy around Christians wanting to use these platforms? And why is it like we're the last people on the planet, by and large, to say, hey, we could use these things for our purposes?
Yeah, so you were saying earlier that you're noticing some theological reasons that some people
Yeah.
were, which are totally valid. It's so funny. Like literally a year ago at the same time, I actually recorded a conversation with a friend. So this friend went to college with me, and he had posted something about how online church isn't real church, and like he is like a theologian, a higher theologian or whatever. And I was like, I think that it can be. Like, I think community is what you make of it and like how
Yeah.
you show up and you contribute. And so, and what is church but a community of people who love each other? And so anyways, I had a great conversation with him and Dave Adamson. Don't know if you know who Dave Adamson is. I called Dave and I was like, could we have a conversation between the three of us? And I was originally going to post it. And then I ended up not doing that because I was like, it feels, I don't know, it felt shameful to like, I don't know, like to kind of like be like, no, I think you really can. And like showing like different ways, because we really didn't come to like a conclusion, either one of us. Like Dave Adamson, don't know if you know Dave or follow him. He was the online pastor at North Point Church,
Got
loves
it.
online church, big proponent of it. And then obviously somebody who I feel like just got out of theology school and isn't like, I don't know, isn't in the same mindset, right? And then immediately the pandemic happens and we have to all go online. And so I was like thinking about what your question is, going back to that, why are churches not doing it? I really can boil it down to a couple of answers. So money is one. So let's not act like it's not. The resources, like churches in America, like especially most churches are under 100 people. They just
Yeah.
don't have the money or the capability. Like they don't have the money and skill. Like they just don't have the talents. Like you said, they maybe give it to the intern, but that's because they literally don't have anybody else to do it other than a
Yeah.
young person in the church. Okay. So I don't know that it's necessarily so much of we don't want to do it because of theological reasons as much as it is time, money, and resources really being the big three. Another reason I thought about too is there's too many channels. They don't know what to pick. Okay.
Yeah.
They don't know if they were going to do it. They don't know what they should do first and then what they should go deep into or not deep into. They don't know
Hmm.
what resources to buy. They don't know what equipment to buy, which is where our group comes in and
Yeah.
helps people. A lot of churches, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, we grew like 6,000 members at the beginning of the pandemic because people just didn't know at all what to
Yeah.
do. And so really too many channels leads to analysis paralysis, right? Like I have too many things to choose, so I'm not going to choose anything. Which is not Christ-like, but I think that we can pray and ask God to give us some clarity, even in technology and what we should do. But two, Proverbs says we should ask, many brothers, we should ask many different, friends for advice. And that's what
Yeah.
the church communications group is really for.
No, that's so good. That's a really good point. Um, yeah, and I think probably a lot of pastors were thinking. I've heard this pastors say, "I didn't have a class in seminary about how to run a social media campaign. Like nobody taught me in any classes about how to
Don't
do
worry,
this, and
I
now I
wrote
got
a
to figure this
textbook
out."
about it. They will eventually.
Yeah, I know that that should be something they
They
probably
will
teach.
now. So
Andrew Kirschman, he said, as someone who's in Bible school, I get a lot of pushback from people saying this isn't church. I do hear that a lot, and I'm sure you do too as well, Katie. Um,
yeah.
so, Katie, what has been some of the most encouraging, to use a Christian phrase, fruit that you've seen from online ministry? Like I gave some examples in our little community here, but just in your time doing online ministry, what have been some like successes that you've seen? Like, man, this was really helpful, or whatever.
Yeah. Do you mind if I share my screen?
Oh, go for it.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen over here. I'm gonna hit present on it. Okay, so if you see,
I did not know that Canva
there
had a present button. That's great to know.
it does. Well, so like a lot of people blame social media, right, for our loneliness problem. We're the loneliest generation that's ever been. And this was before COVID, by the way. This all this research that I originally had, more than 60% of people admitted that they felt lonely at some point in 2019,
Wow.
an increase of 7%. So before COVID, we had the most lonely people. And it wasn't just one generation, right? It was every single generation was the loneliest generation ever. Gen Z was lonely, millennials were lonely, boomers were lonely, everybody was lonely across the board.
Wow.
And all of this right before 2020 even happened. And then, COVID-19 just quadrupled the risk, because actually being lonely and sad actually led to more of a COVID-19 risk.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
it's just like compounded on itself, like stress and puts your immunity like at risk. It just was not a winning situation. And something that was interesting that's not in this that I needed to go back and include in this presentation at some point is during COVID, like when it happened on like around March 12th to March 20th, prayer shot up like a hockey stick on Google Trends. So when people searched, they were searching for prayer like 100% in March,
Hmm.
right? So we had the answer, but the church wasn't really readily providing the answers that they were searching for necessarily. So it's difficult to find opportunities to share the gospel online. And I kind of talk about how, the ways we've always done it don't necessarily work. Like tracks are weird.
Yep.
The $20 track is just rude. We have, the Evangel Cube, which doesn't make any sense, but we have fun with it in a third world country. But, there are ways to easily build relationships online. And so I talk about, how I was this age when I started my first online community. I'm just kind of going to blow through this. Here's Harry Potter fan zone. We won an award from J.K. Rowling. How exciting.
I love that.
And there's a community I have today. Really fun. I'm going to blow through some of this real quick. There's lots of ways you can create online community. Feel free. I have this talk literally on so many podcasts. So please
Got it.
reach out to me. I'm happy to give it to you. But let's talk about practically, like you asked me, have I seen this work? Like,
Yeah.
is there ways? And so I'm going to talk about a couple ways here and maybe some things that I've done personally. So this is my friend Marianne. Marianne's an eye doctor, as you can see. Marianne and I were good friends in Nashville. She really wanted to help people who were single hang out, essentially, across churches, and she didn't want it to feel weird.
Hmm.
That's like the biggest thing about singles ministry. It all feels weird. It just feels like a weird meat market. We're not into it. And so anyway, she just wanted people to meet and to find godly marriages if that's what they wanted, or if they just wanted to find community, then great. And so that was something that was really on her heart, her little eye doctor heart. And so we launched something called the Community Table. Originally, it was a Facebook event on Marianne's personal profile. We moved it to a Facebook group that was closed. Anyways, today it would be called private. And immediately we had to, so the first event we had, by the way, we had 50 people at. And then we started growing, and we had it at a different house every month, never the same location twice. So if people say, oh, my church has to be at the same building every single time, it does not.
Yeah.
So we had it at different houses literally every single time across Nashville, sometimes within an hour ride of each other. And anyways, it grew from 50 to about 80 people at every event every month. And then we had this online community of about 700 members that was just thriving. And out of this community, we actually had, while it was going, we only kept it around for a year. I know it's sad. People move on with their lives and moved from Nashville and stuff. That was originally the core member part of this group. But out of this group during the year that it was going on, we did have 3 couples get married. So that was
Wow. No, that's
yeah.
so cool.
So, which was the whole point, right? That's what she wanted to do. And so, I talk about how you can reach into Facebook groups that are already created. You can either create your own Facebook group, which is what Marianne did. She created her own Facebook group to reach people in her community. You can join Facebook groups, though, that are already in your community. You can do the same thing with Instagram. You can join Instagram, things that are going on in your community too. But, you know, I told some people about how you could join a Facebook group in your community and like just go out. And of course, you can't do this during COVID right now, but there are plenty of ways you can contribute to conversation, become more known, become helpful in your community by doing things. Anyways, this girl, she reached out. She said, and I'm gonna read what she said. Your podcast gave me the nudge to finally put myself out there and join a community group. And I've been seeing posts about our neighborhood walking group, but felt like putting my introverted self out there with a bunch of strangers would be overwhelming. But tonight I took the plunge. I joined their Facebook group and got in on an evening walk. The 9 of us plus 2 dogs had a lovely 30-minute walk around a lake and then took a group selfie before one of the ladies sent us home with homemade pickles and applesauce, which sounds legit. She said, this might be one of the best gospel opportunities I've had in a long time.
Wow.
And this is just really simple things. Okay, here's another example. All right, so right when COVID happened, my friend Brandon was like, I'm going to start one of those Facebook groups you're always talking about. I was like, okay. Overnight, he got 7,000 members.
Jeez.
And it was in response to the coronavirus. When people, especially this was in northeastern Louisiana, by the way, and when people couldn't get a hold of delivery services yet, a lot of rural areas, especially northeastern Louisiana, just didn't have delivery services. This group really stepped up to provide for people with special needs and disabilities that couldn't go out into the area.
Wow.
Anyways, this group was created to organize and share resources, etc. Like I said, within 24 hours, they had 4,000 members, and now I mean, who knows how many they have now, 12,000 or something. Brandon, who is the admin of this, he sent me this. This woman named Gail was in the group and doing a lot of significant work on her own accord. She started to work with members of the group to deliver groceries. And because we're not wanting to touch money, she kept herself accountable by posting receipts into the group of
Wow.
groceries she was buying and delivering to people. So Gail on her own accord, Gail was not a member of Brandon's church or anything. Gail on her own accord took this upon herself to help people in her community. And he said probably $15,000 in groceries over the last week, all given from members in the group. So members in the group also started contributing money to help people. And as she was in Walmart grocery so much, they asked her what she was doing. And they actually started giving her money. So here's some pictures of some ladies at Walmart giving Gail some money to help people in her community during the coronavirus, which is wild to me. So, you know, my big question is, what is the first goal of our social media channels, even as churches, as people? Wasn't to get people to come to our events, but was to, you know, really reach to minister to people where they already are online. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second, but something that I've been really passionate about, and how do you do this on your personal, right? Like a lot of this is like, in which, I mean, some of this was personally, but something you can do that's really simple, you can do right now, is you can literally go on your Facebook or your Instagram and literally write the question, what can I be praying for you right now? And I know that people are going to come out of the woodwork to ask you or to tell you, because honestly, they're just waiting because they know that you know Jesus. They're just waiting for somebody to please ask them, because so many people are lonely. So many people got so much anxiety, so much stress, and they know that you have the hope of the gospel with you. So how selfish are we not to share that with them? And a lot of people don't know how to pray. So I really recommend that if you do get people asking you, like, what, you know, for a prayer request, that you actually sit out and you write that prayer, or you record it with the voice record feature, because Facebook Messenger and Instagram have that voice record. Writing it out is really helpful, because it's just what Jesus did, right? Modeling prayer for us. We're modeling prayer for them. So, because a lot of times they don't even know how to pray for themselves.
Yeah.
And so writing out your prayers, I think, is very meaningful. So, and then another way that you can share, and you said this earlier, you know, about sharing church content, sharing, you know, biblical content, that kind of stuff. Of course, don't share, like, I don't know. I always feel like, especially churches, like they'll share pictures of like, on wings like eagles. No, I have a picture of an eagle or something. And I'm like, please don't do that. Sharing verses out of context isn't helping anyone. But like sharing, I don't know, like there's something about putting yourself out there that is really, and being vulnerable with the gospel is like really interesting, and also really, like, it's really intriguing to people.
Yeah.
Like they want, because you were vulnerable, they want to be vulnerable with you, because you created this space for that. And so I actually during, oh gosh, it's been 4 or 5 years now. Back when Facebook Live was new, I did 31 days of reading Proverbs over Facebook Live. And I
Hmm.
didn't really explain the scripture. I just read like a chapter of Proverbs. And then I said, like, if you have prayer requests, please leave them for me. And I never had so many people reach out to me than I did while I was reading the book of Proverbs. And, it was really interesting. I turned red so many times. There is some crazy stuff in the book of Proverbs that you're like, like if you like an aggravating, like if you have like an agitated wife or something, it's worse than like there's just stuff in there that you're like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about, Proverbs? But it's so good. It is fun to like watch your reactions afterwards. You're like, oh, that wasn't there. And anyways, it pours back into you, and people want to be available for that. Anyway, that's some thoughts.
No, Katie, that's so helpful. Thanks so much for sharing that. I mean, I think it may or may not be obvious, right? But all those examples that you just gave of all those people, I don't think any one of those was a pastor, right? Like
No, not a single one.
they're
Right.
just
Yeah.
regular people, right?
Just
And
regular
so
people.
yeah, the perception is, who are the people who are supposed to do ministry? Well, it's clearly the pastors and people who
Yeah.
work for
So
churches and
the
stuff.
first Reformation was giving the Bible back to the people. The second Reformation will be giving the ministry back to the people.
Oh, that's so good. That's really
And
good.
so I
That's
didn't come
something
up with
right
that. That's
down.
Mike Glenn. I'll give credit where credit's due. That was definitely my pastor in Brentwood. But like it's just so true. Like the next Reformation is about you. Okay. It's about
Yeah.
you coming back to like giving the ministry back to you.
Yeah.
Because who cares, what I do or even you do. But like I want the gospel to go forward, and it can't go forward if it's all on my shoulders or
Yep.
your shoulders.
Yep. No, that's so true. Okay, so we're just about out of time, but everyone just in the chat say a huge thank you to Katie. And Katie, how can people find you online? If someone says, I like what she says, I want to follow her, what should they do? Should they look you up on Instagram?
Yeah, if you can go to my Instagram, it's KDJ Allred. And that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. I love some DMs, so please feel free to message me. You can also go to katieallred.com or churchcommunications.com. Either way, you can get a hold of me there too.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Katie.